Good evening, everyone. I hope everybody had a great Friday. Thank you so much for joining me for this presentation. I'm going to share my screen and we can get started. Okay, so we are meeting today. I'm going to minimize you guys. We are meeting today to talk about Mezcal, and we are doing this as a part of me trying to become a certified spirits educator. So, purpose of this presentation, why did I choose Mezcal? I chose Mezcal because agave spirits are incredibly important in today's market. So they're both protected regions of origin, much like Champagne, much like Cremant, and they are specific to the spirit style. So they're commercially important around the globe right now. There's nowhere that you can go that people aren't talking about Mezcal and tequila. It's a growing category. So Mezcal is growing at a pace of over 13% per year. It's super relevant. So here in DC, where I live, it's making its way into every bar program and cocktail list and store set around the country. So everybody sort of is, they have a lot of questions about it. So we're going to talk through the confusing elements of Mezcal together today. Another reason we were doing this is to be able to understand the labels. So there are several different styles of Mezcal, and the labels are not words that we run into all the time. So the more that you know about it, the more that you can figure out what it's trying to signify about the spirit and figure out which one that you want to drink. Some learning objectives today. So after this presentation, we are going to be able to discuss where Mezcal is made and what makes it unique. We're going to be able to discuss the production processes of Mezcal, and we're going to be able to differentiate between styles of Mezcal. And we will pause for a set of questions between each section. So with the purpose of time, if you could just hold your questions until the very end, that would be great. Okay, so first, a brief history of Mezcal. There is a saying that they say in Mexico. I know we all speak Spanish here. So, para todo mal, mezcal, y para todo bien también. What that really means is for all the bad days, mezcal, and for all the good days, mezcal as well. It's really part of the culture there. So, and that's going to be the theme of this whole presentation, is talking about the different culture behind mezcal and Mexico in general. So it all starts with the plant. So mezcal is made from agave, and the local term for that is maguey. It's a plant indigenous to the Americas. It was first discovered over 12 million years ago, and it looks like this drawing to the left. It's basically like a giant overgrown pineapple. So you have the piña, which is the pineapple part, and then you have the leaves, which are called the coas, and this is the humidor. So he is going to come in and hack the leaves off and harvest the piña for cooking and the eventual process to make mezcal. So there are over 200 species in Mexico. The story really begins in the mid-1500s when Cortez conquers Mexico from Spain, and he discovers that the Aztecs have been making a low-strength fermented beverage from that agave, and it's called pulque. Enter distillation, because the Spanish were distilling a various amount of things, including brandy at the time. And so the locals learned distillation techniques from the Spanish. So they begin to distill pulque into mezcal, and they call it vino de mezcal. Now with this, there were over 200 different species of agave that they were using. So one of them started to stick out over time, and that was the Weber Azul, so the blue Weber agave. And they realized over time, they're like, okay, this tastes a little bit different, smells a little bit different, and it was becoming something that was more sought after. So they decided, we'll call it Mezcal de Tequila, and they were naming it after Tequila, the town that it was made in, or predominantly made around. And so with that, it's important to note that tequila is a type of mezcal, but mezcal is not a type of tequila. Mezcal is a much broader subject, if you will. And so from the 1900s to present, tequila was declared the national drink in the Mexican Revolution against the Spanish. It totally soared in popularity in the 1990s. And that entire century, mezcal really just skated under the radar. And it was something of a worker's drink. It was, not the upper echelon of agave beverages. And it entered the global scene in the early 2000s with more of a focus on the lesser known, right? Like the corners of the culinary and the beverage world. And people started to seek out mezcal more often. Okay, agave spirits on the map, just so you can see where everything sort of shakes out. I know some of us on the call have been to Oaxaca. So Oaxaca is the center of mezcal production, but mezcal is made in 9 states in total. And so it's made in Oaxaca, in Puebla, in Guerrero, San Luis Potosí, Zacatecas, Durango, Tamaulipas, Guanajuato, and Michoacan. That's different from tequila, which is predominantly centered around Jalisco, this town right, or this state right here. And it overlaps with Tamaulipas, Guanajuato, and Michoacan. Another tequila only area is Nayarit. So if you'll see it, Oaxaca is in the south of Mexico. So if you're thinking about how to break it up, think of mezcal as being centered around, the southern tip of Mexico, with the center as well. And tequila is going to be further up north. So major differences between tequila and mezcal. The biggest thing to note is that tequila is a smaller area, right? So it's protected much like champagne in France is protected. And it's made in 5 states. Mezcal covers a much larger area. It used to actually be made all over Mexico, but with the introduction of a DO in 1994, it's centered in 9 states now. So it's a much larger area. Tequila can only be made, or it has to be made with a percentage of Weber Blue Agave. Mezcal is predominantly made from Espadín. That's the most popular. There's about a dozen that you'll see pretty commonly on labels, and over 50 species are allowed. So tequila is one version of agave, mezcal is multiple. Production processes. Tequila is a large-scale, mechanized, very industrial process at this point. Mezcal is still very small scale, very artisanal. So you'll see in the size of liters produced, tequila with over 250 million annually. Mezcal only has 2 million. And it's growing. Back in 2014, they were only making, I want to say, 500,000 liters a year. So it's growing like crazy as people are getting more invested into it. And this is the main thing, the next part in the production process to note about what contributes to the aromas. So the agave for tequila is usually cooked in steam ovens called autoclaves, and mezcal is usually cooked in fire pits in the ground. And that's not to say that they both can't be cooked in the other ways, but typically it's the agave and the fire pits that make mezcal have a smokier aroma, and tequila will have a cleaner aroma because it's a more refined process. Mezcal is also usually higher in proof, sitting at 45 to 55% ABV. Okay, bring y'all back up. Some questions. Okay, what is the base ingredient of mezcal?
Agave.
Perfect. And where in Mexico is mezcal made?
Primarily in Oaxaca, but there's 9 total states within Mexico that mezcal can be made in.
Yes. And what are some differences between tequila and mezcal?
Mezcal has a more smoky flavor, where tequila is more citrusy, peppery.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, mezcal is also made in fire pits, where tequila is more of like a steam pit, I think you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a steam oven. Yes.
Steam oven, that's it.
Yes. Awesome. Okay. Let me see. All right. So to talk about a product, it's really important to talk about how it's made. So because that's really what makes everything unique in the beverage world. So cultivation is where everything begins on these farms of agave. The agaves that are used to make mezcal typically take 8 to 30 years to grow. Now that's different from Weber Blue Agave. That one only takes 6 to 8 years to mature. So mezcal is a much longer process. It takes a long time. And then the harvest is super labor intensive. We saw a picture of those pinos earlier. They're taller than the humidor. They're taller than us. They weigh a ton. And you're not going to take those leaves with you, right? Like you can't cook. I mean, you could probably cook the leaves and make something out of it, but not to make mezcal. So you got to get rid of the leaves. You got to get to the heart of the plant. The cooking. So this is the first thing that has to happen because that piña is way too hard to be milled or fermented as is. So if you are using hornos de pozo, which are the fire pits in the ground, it takes 3 to 5 days of cooking with stones over the top and a flame underneath the ground. Or if you're using hornos de mampostería, which is also common, it takes 1 to 2 days in masonry ovens. And so these are made of brick. We'll see a picture of them in a minute. The next step in the process is milling. And so you have to mill it because while the piña has been softened in the cooking, you got to shred it up. And if you've ever seen a cooked agave, it looks very much like pulled pork from Chipotle. So you've got to mill it. And you do that by you use various methods to mill. So the most common in mezcal are using mallets, like, banging on it with your hand, a tahona, which is a large stone wheel that we'll see in a second, and mills. And so mills are going to be something that's really common to tequila as well, because they provide the most refined process. And then the next step in production is fermentation. So you've got to ferment the beverage, add some yeast, get some alcohol, and then you've got to distill it. So a difference between mezcal and tequila is most of mezcal will usually use pot stills, and they're directly heated. And that's something really unique in the world of distillation to this area of the world. And basically what directly heated pot stills contribute is a very characterful spirit. So there's a lot going on. Whereas tequila, sometimes they might have pot stills. A lot of the time they're going to have continuous or column stills. And that just means that they're going to strip more of those esters and more of that complexity that you're going to find left in the bottle for mezcal. And the last step is maturation. So we're going to talk about the things that mezcal can be aged in between distillation and when it goes into the bottle. Okay, mezcal terms. The hornos de mampostería that we talked about a little bit ago, these are the above ground brick masonry ovens. So as you can see, there are all the piñas stuffed in there, ready to be cooked. Here's an hornos de pozo, a traditional fire pit. As you can see, it's almost as tall as this woman, and it's about to be filled with those agaves covered with stones, and the fire will be lit from underneath. And then here you have a tahona. So it's a large stone wheel that's used to mill those cooked piñas into a more shredded, fermentable style of agave. And it's usually pulled by an animal, but it can be electrically pulled as well. Okay, the three main categories of mezcal, and this is important because these are what you're going to see on any label at any store. So it's easier to start from the top, from the most specific, and that's with ancestral mezcal. So the cooking is specifically in those underground fire pits. The milling is limited to the mallets, the tahona, or the mills. Fermentation can be in anything from a rock pit to a tree trunk to a masonry tank, a clay urn, or even an animal hide. And distillation must be with the directly heated pot still made from copper or clay. So take it down a notch. We have artisanal mezcal. Those can be made in the fire pits, or you can use the hornos de mampostería, the above ground ovens. Milling, pretty open to a different number of options. Fermentation still has to be in those traditional vessels like the rock pit, the tree trunk, the wooden vat, or the animal hide, and distillation again with the pot still. And then you have the most basic mezcal. And this is a lot of the time what we're going to see in the store, and the most approachable in terms of price point, certainly. And with the cooking here, it is usually going to have some element of the fire pit or the hornos, but you also are allowed those steam ovens that tequila uses. Milling is also not all that regulated. Fermentation, you're going to have more industry standard items such as wood, concrete, or stainless steel vats. And distillation is going to be usually in continuous or column stills. So all that to say, there's just a lot more art that goes into making the artisanal and the ancestral mezcal. And therefore, you're going to have a lot more complexity going on, but you're still going to have that traditional smokiness in your regular mezcal as well. Okay. Some more questions. What is a tahona?
It is a giant stone wheel to mill the tequila, or to mill the agave.
Yes, perfect. Yes. And why is mezcal smoky in taste?
I think the biggest reason is because it's basically made in a fire pit, or it's cooked like in a fire pit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the strands of agave can lend themselves to a smokier taste as well. And what are the three categories of mezcal?
Artisanal, ancestral, and then just regular mezcal.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. All right, moving on. Okay, now we have the classes of mezcal. So we talked about the categories, and mezcal can be split into 6 classes beyond that. So if you look to these labels to the left, you will see añejo, joven, and reposado. They might look familiar because they're what we see on tequila labels as well. So we'll start with joven, the white one. You can also see blanco for that sometimes too. And you'll note that these say mezcal artisanal. So when you're labeling mezcal, you're going to have that category and also the class. So whatever style it's going to be will list it on there as well. Joven just means that it's young, right? We know that word in Spanish. It means that it's not been altered in any way. It's been aged in an oak vessel for less than 2 months. Reposado, it's been aged in an oak vessel of any size or shape for between 2 to 12 months. So that's where you're getting that golden color from the barrels. And then añejo has been aged in an oak vessel smaller than 1,000 liters for a minimum of 1 year. So añejo meaning old. That's the highest age that you're going to find traditionally on the shelf in mezcal. And then classes of mezcal. So we have a label to the right. We actually just acquired this product, and I think that it's a great example of all of the different components of mezcal all in one label. So we have the maguey, which is the type of agave. It's going to be Espadín. It's listing the village that it comes from, Candelaria Tegole, the grind, the stone grind. So they're using a tahona here to mill it, the type of still, a copper pot still. The date of distillation, the batch size, the class. So here we are in the classes talking about these three styles. This class is distilled with corn. So that's that destilado con, the third one down on this list. And the category overall is mezcal artisanal. So these three more specialty classes of mezcal are going to be madurado en vidrio, and that means that it's aged in a glass vessel larger than 5 liters for a minimum of 1 year. And that's pretty traditional in mezcal to do the madurado en vidrio. So that's more traditional and they've kept it around for a long time. So you might see that one pretty often. And then you have abocado con, which basically means macerated with. So the fun fact about this is anything can actually be used as long as it's safe for human consumption. So examples that you might see with the avocado con are an agave worm, which can contribute a more protein and salinity forward flavor to the spirit. And you might have some lemon, some honey, some orange. A lot of fruit flavors can be found here. And then the third one, which is very traditional, is destilado con. So that means that it's being redistilled. It's being put back through that pot still with flavoring ingredients. So the elote from Bago over here has been distilled with corn. So when you're redistilling that mezcal with the corn, you're going to get a really nice sweet corn element to the mezcal. Some very traditional kinds of distilled mezcal, or redistilled mezcal, I should say, are pechugas. So pechuga is actually distilled with turkey or chicken breast, and it's raw and it's super traditional. I was just having a conversation with someone about it yesterday, and they were like, yeah, that's what my family has at holidays, and their family is from Oaxaca. So it's a special thing that comes out, and it's, you know, something for the family to share. You could also have rabbits, plums, corn like the elote, a whole number of things. Again, anything that's safe for human consumption is fair game. Okay. Any final questions?
Yes. How is I think you said distilling through turkey and raw meat. How is that safe for consumption? I'm so intrigued by that.
Yes, I know. So I believe that with the very high proof of mezcal, and it's being redistilled. So when it goes through a still, you have higher alcohol and it's refining it. And so when it's distilled in there, I think the high alcohol prevents any of the contaminating bits. But yes, it is very interesting and something that is very traditional for them. So again, it all goes back to mezcal is something that it's very small scale production. So a lot of the time it's just for one family to be had at home. And so all of these bigger brands that you see over here are not actually a distillery that you can visit, right? Like they're a compilation of different mezcaleros. And so they make different labels to reflect what that mezcalero would like to bring to market. But there's nobody's producing enough really to have a large scale brand family from it. So it's more that it's a compilation of different people's styles.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just have a comment. I just always thought agave was like an aloe plant.
Yeah.
I had no idea that it was like a pineapple. So I thought that was cool.
Well, so, and a lot of people think it's agave or think it's aloe or think it's a cactus, but it's actually a succulent. So
Interesting.
yeah. Okay.
I have a question about why do you think mezcal is having such an emergence in like the boutique market or
Yes.
kind of the trendy market?
Yeah. Well, I think that we're seeing a trend towards the unseen and the less traveled right now. Like in the culinary world, every Michelin star restaurant that you're going to, there are so many interesting plates that, you know, maybe we've never even heard of. And everybody's trying to find the thing that's hard to get, the thing that's hard to know, the new thing. And people are steering away from the more industrial side of things. So it's like you're less likely to go out to a high-end restaurant these days and find a grilled chicken breast, right? They're going to do something more interesting. That's the thing of the past. They're going to spice it up. Maybe they're going to have grilled catfish or something different. And that's sort of the thing that we're seeing with beverages as well. So tequila has been around for a long time. It's had popularity for a long time. And it is now, the stage is going to mezcal because tequila has become so industrialized. A lot of them are so similar. They're using these really high power processes. And so they can sort of all look and smell the same sometimes. And so mezcal is where you can find all those differences. Like no two mezcaleros make mezcal in the same way. There's all these different ways for them to make it interesting and have, you know, these different things that they can macerate with it. And I think we're just seeing, yeah, more of an interest in the unknown. And it's been one of those things that's been around for a long time that people are just starting to get interested in. And we love it. It's delicious,
Love it.
right?
It's so good.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for listening to this presentation. I hope you learned something about mezcal and can now discuss it in comparison with tequila. And if you would like to learn anything else, here are my sources. And let me stop sharing and we will go from there. Okay. Thank you all so much. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Thanks,
Thank
Claude.
you.